Brown water navy is a term that originated in the United States Navy, referring to the small gunboats and patrol boats used in rivers, along with some of the larger ships that supported them as mother ships, from which they operated. A broader meaning is any naval force that has the capacity to carry out military operations in river or littoral environments, commonly known as riverine warfare. The term brown water generally describes river environments carrying heavy sediment loads, such as from soil runoff or flooding. Since presence of brown water requires a soil source, whether riverine or coastal, the term has become associated with littoral navies. The term brown water can be either river or amphibious in contrast to blue water navy, which is capable of independent oceanic operations. History: after losing its blue water fleet in the Battle of Copenhagen, the Kingdom of Denmark-Norway quickly built a brown water navy. The partial successes of the resulting gunboat war were undone by land invasion. American Civil War equals. The term brown water navy originated in the American Civil War. As a blueprint for the strangulation of the Confederate States of America, Winfield Scott's Anaconda Plan called for a two-pronged approach by first blocking the South's harbors and then pushing along the Mississippi River, effectively cutting the Confederate territory in two while also robbing the South of its main artery of transport. The U.S. Navy was assigned the blockade of the seaports, while a new force of gunboats and river ironclads, together with regular Army units, would take, or at least lay siege on, the Confederate forts and cities along the Mississippi. In the early days of the war, these boats were built and crewed by the U.S. Army, with the naval officers commanding them being the only direct connection to the U.S. Navy. By the autumn of 1862, the boats and their mission were transferred to the Department of the Navy. Because of the river's murky brown water, the ships that participated in these Mississippi campaigns were quickly referred to as the Brown Water Navy, as opposed to the regular U.S. Navy. U.S. gunboat diplomacy equals, save for an occasional river patrol boat, the United States River Ironclad Navy was all but abolished at the end of the Civil War. Yet the concept of a river defense force lived on in countries and regions where rivers enabled the U.S. to project its military presence, allowing it to protect its foreign interests abroad. U.S. riverboats of the Asiatic Fleet operated in portions of Chinese rivers during the 1920s, such as the gunboat USS Fanao, which was sunk in 1937, and the USS Wake, which was captured by the Japanese in December 1941. The U.S. Navy during that era was, under the terminology used then, protecting U.S. foreign policy and her citizens abroad via gunboat diplomacy. The China gunboat USS Asheville was lost in action March 1942. Indochina War during the First Indochina War, the French Navy created the Dinosaur, in 1947, to operate in the waters of the Mekong and Red Rivers. They have succeeded the river flotillas created in 1945, by the request of General Leclerc. The Dinosaur served until the end of the conflict in 1955, and its concept would be later adopted by the United States Navy in the Vietnam War. 10 Dinosaurs were created, with 5 based in Cochinchina and the others in Tonkin. Each one was made of about 10 vessels and 1 commando's marine unit. The types of vessels operated by a Dinosaur included LCI, LCT, LCM, LCVP, LCS, LCA, LSSL and fire support vessels. The role of the Dinosaur was to transport, land and support the infantry, to patrol the water courses and to assure the supply of the isolated posts. The sailors that served in the Dinosaur were referred as the Navy in khaki, in comparison with the sailors that served in the ocean that were referred as the Navy in white. Portuguese colonial war equals. In Portuguese service, the Brown Water Navy has been often referred as the naval dust, for its use of a large number of small vessels, in comparison with the conventional Blue Water Navy that uses a smaller number of larger vessels. In several historical periods, the Portuguese Navy had to develop riverine forces to operate in the former Portuguese colonies in Asia, South America and Africa. During the Portuguese Overseas War in Africa, the Portuguese Navy created a Brown Water Navy to operate in the rivers and lakes of Angola, Portuguese Guinea and Mozambique, against the separatist guerrillas. For the organization of their riverine forces, the Portuguese were inspired by the French experience in Indochina with the dinner sort and by their own historical experience in the operation of river flotillas in support of the Portuguese colonial pacification campaigns in Africa during the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Under the local commands of the Navy, the Portuguese created riverboat flotillas in the Zaire River in Angola, in the Lake Nyassa in Mozambique and in the river system of the Portuguese Guinea. Smaller riverine forces were also created in eastern Angola to operate in the Cuito, Zambezi, Cuando, Lungua Copyright Bungo and Cuonza rivers and in Tete to operate in the Mozambican section of the Zambezi River. These forces were responsible for the surveillance and the interdiction of the rivers and lakes to the enemy, avoiding their use for the infiltration and supply of guerrillas in the interior of Portuguese territory. Additionally, the riverine forces were also tasked with the mobile fire support to the land forces, the movement of troops, the supply of the Portuguese garrisons and the support of the civilian population in the riverine areas. For these riverine forces, the Portuguese Navy conceived 5 types of vessels: the LFG, the LFP, the LDG, the LDM and the LDP. The LFGs were armed with 40 mm guns and the LDPs with 20 mm guns, with several units of both types being also armed with rocket launchers. The Lodge, LDM and LDP types were based, respectively, in the LCT, LCM and LCVP-LCA designs, but were modified in order to be also used in the patrol, fire support and Marines mobile base roles, including the capacity for a greater mission endurance. This modifications included the protection of the sensitive parts with armor, the installation of 40 mm or 20 mm guns and the improvement of the crew accommodations, partially at the expense of the cargo deck. The riverboat flotillas were complemented by assault units of Special Marines and security units of Marines. The Portuguese Marines operated based in the patrol boats and landing craft and also using their own rubber boats. Vietnam War On December 18, 1965, for the first time since the American Civil War, the United States Navy formalized the new Brown Water Navy in Vietnam. Initially the Brown Water Navy patrolled the inland waterways, primarily with South Vietnamese river craft, boats mostly inherited from the French during their war, which in turn, had been received from the U.S., as military aid, during the French fight against the Viet Minh. As the new fiberglass PBR, using water jet propulsion, became available, it became the main interdiction vessel for the inland waterways. For coastal duty the South Vietnamese Navy used larger seaworthy craft. These were replaced by new U.S. Navy swift boats and United States Coast Guard Point-class cutters. By the late 1960s, the swift boat would commence operations alongside the PBRs in the inland waters, as well as maintaining operations along the coastline. Navy and Coast Guard ships assumed coastal duties. The Brown Water Navy was a joint venture between the Navy and the Army, modeled after the earlier French riverine and coastal patrols in the First Indochina War. In the beginning this force consisted of mostly modified surplus USWWI landing craft, such as the LCMs, LCVPs, LCIs, etc. The only entirely new riverine boat from the French Indochina War had been the French-designed STCN. This particular craft influenced the design of the U.S. Navy's only original riverine boat built for the Vietnam War. The 50-foot all-steel hull, aluminum superstructured ASPB. The Alpha boat was built by the Gunderson Company, in Oregon, USA, and was of reinforced construction, in order to survive exploding mines. As a consequence, the ASPB earned a reputation as the minesweeper of the riverine forces. Other riverine craft included, along with the aforementioned PBRs, PCFs, and ASPBs, were the Patrol Air Cushion Vehicles, Coast Guard Point-class 82-foot patrol boats, and the Monitors. Together these craft formed a mobile riverine force, that utilized various supporting facilities, such as the yard repair berthing and messings, advanced bases, LSTs, helicopter and Seawolf units. The Brown Water Navy was largely successful in its efforts to stop North Vietnam using the South Vietnamese coast and rivers to resupply its military and the Viet Cong. The flow of weapons and ammunition came to a virtual standstill during Operation Market Time, from 1965 and 1970. Brown water units were formalized in January 1967 with the 2nd Brigade, 9th Infantry Division arriving under the command of Major General William Fulton. Later that same year, in combination with U.S. Navy Task Force 117 they formed the Mobile Riverine Force. In 1970, for the last time since the Civil War, the Navy stood down the last of its Brown Water Navy units, as they were turned over to the South Vietnamese and Cambodian governments under the Vietnamization policy. See also, Blue Water Navy, Insect-class gunboat, Mississippi Marine Brigade, Omaha Military Flotilla, Maritime Geography, film. The Sand Pebbles. Starring actor Steve McQueen, film. Apocalypse Now. Starring actor Martin Sheen, Operation Sea Lords, Serbian River Flotilla, Homata-class gunboat, River Pirate. References. Bibliography. External links, Riverine Warfare Brown Water Navy Resources at Texas Tech, Brown Water Enterprises, History, Hobbies and Militaria.